Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to Sniper Elite 5, where today we are reviewing the RSC 1918, which means we have finally finished off the base game rifles for our in-depth series, and as a result, the next video will be ranking Sniper Elite 5's rifles. It's worth noting that I won't rank any DLC rifles, including the Enfield, until they've stopped making updates for this game, so we can have a definitive list at the end of the game's life cycle. But I will still be ranking the 6 base game rifles. So, without further ado, let's get into this. The Fusil Automatique Model 1917, also called the RSC M1917, was a French semi-auto rifle developed in the middle of the First World War, and as a result is one of the very earliest semi-auto rifles. Whilst semi-auto rifles in one form or another had existed since the early 1880s, the RSC was one of the first to be fielded in any sort of quantity. The RSC 1917 used lots of components from the Lebel model 1886, the weapon it was succeeding, including the barrel, furniture, trigger guard and ammunition. However, the M1917 proved too heavy, too long for use in the trenches, and it required maintenance every 100 rounds or so, which was a major issue. The updated RSC 1918 model used in-game was far superior. Production began in November of 1918, meaning it was never used in the Great War, but it was much shorter, much lighter, and corrected pretty much every issue of the original design, and, despite the shorter barrel, the gun was actually more accurate than the RSC 1917. Long story short, if you happened to find yourself in the late 1910s and you needed a self-loading rifle, you should look no further than the RSC 1918. The RSC 1917 served in World War I, the RSC 1918 in the Rif War, and both saw limited use in World War II by the French and by the Volkssturm, because of course, who gave it the designation Selbstlader de Gewehr 310F. In-game, the RSC 1918 is a very interesting rifle. It also isn't very good, but it has character and that's important. It does the most damage out of any semi-auto at 127 points, which puts it in Mosin Nagant territory, and its muzzle velocity is similar to the G43, which is also very impressive. The RSC often gets slandered for its apparent lack of muzzle velocity, but I think this is mostly down to hearsay, and not based in any actual grounded fact, especially seeing as nobody ever slanders the G43's muzzle velocity, and there is literally a 10 meter second difference. The recoil recovery is very good, and the reload speed is better than that of most bolt actions, but it does get outclassed by the other semi-autos. But, and it's a big but, the RSC has some fairly poor stats in other areas. I'm going to run through them all quickly, and then go back to some that need more focus, so here goes. The RSC has the second lowest effective range of any rifle after the Delisle, the worst fire rate of any semi-auto by 150 rounds per minute margin, the second worst aim stability in the game, being only a centimetre off the bouncy G43, the highest horizontal recoil in the game, the highest vertical recoil in the game, joint first place for worst spread accuracy alongside the G43 and Winchester, the worst time to aim of any rifle in the game, poor equip time, the loudest audible range of any rifle in the game, surpassing even the Winchester, and a very, very shallow magazine, the smallest of any semi-auto, and tied with the bolt actions. There's a lot to digest here. For simplicity's sake, it can't hit the broadside of a barn, especially if said barn is any further away than melee distance. You can fire one shot each week, you'll need the assistance of a forklift to shoulder it, and it'll attract every German west of Berlin when fired, and it can't mount any good optics, which, to be fair, is a problem shared with the G43. It seems ridiculous to me that the M1 carbine, which has a terrible time when it comes to ranged combat, gets the M84 scope, but the RSC and the G43 don't get the ZF39, which is the German equivalent. They didn't even used to get the PK Berlin, and You can tell Rebellion didn't want them to have the PK Berlin, but you know, they had to add it because the PK Berlin and the M81 are available for every rifle. Either way, the RSC is like a 1970s Lancia. It's a lot of fun and it has bags of character, but it just isn't very good. The power isn't even that good, and that's this thing's main focus. It needs the marksman barrel to reach the magic 130 damage threshold, which is the amount you need to one-shot an infantryman anywhere on the body. Its default 127 damage value is so close, but it is ever so inconsistent without the marksman's barrel, and with a magazine this small and reloads this long, it does need this one-shot, one-kill capability. If the base damage was 130, it'd be fine, as it would one-shot infantry but not Jaegers, which, considering this thing's downsides, I think would be fair. Or if they let you put overpressure rounds in it like you can with the Sren. But without that, I think that the RSC struggles to be a competent weapon in its base form. I asked people what they thought of the RSC, and the poll produced some very interesting responses. It shows that 7% of my viewers are liars, but it also shows that there are very mixed opinions on this thing. Most people said it's quite mid, with a substantial amount calling it the worst rifle in the game, but I think opinion was generally middling to positive for this thing. Which, you know, sounds good, but if I did this same poll for the Springfield, I can guarantee you that the opinion would be ultra positive, and there would be no one saying it's the worst rifle in the game, and I doubt there'd even be anyone saying it's bad. I think that pretty much everybody would be saying it's either good, the best, or mid if I did this for the Springfield, and the spread of opinion on the RSC shows that maybe it isn't very good. Now I want to go over two custom setups I have made for the RSC, the first of which being a high-powered sniper's build. I use the ZF-4 scope because, like with the G43, it's the best this thing can offer. I use the extended marksman barrel, which boosts this thing's damage and range to great levels. The Mark I boys break, an attachment often overlooked in favour of its bigger brother, works well at taming this thing's vicious recoil, although it does incur a substantial noise penalty. The leather pad improves aim stability, allowing for better long-range performance. I don't take a foregrip, and the heavy bolt works well at reducing recoil, with the laminated beach improving aim stability once more. This setup works really quite well at mid-range. I was able to hit the 300 meter targets with decent consistency with the scope zeroed. However, I do find the long-range performance to be somewhat poor, especially compared to a similar G43 setup I did last video. But this setup is excellent when it comes to damage, being a one-hit kill to infantrymen anywhere on the body, which is very useful. The muzzle velocity could have been helped by the Mark II boys break, but I felt that the help it gave was minimal and I preferred the advantages of the Mark I break. You won't be doing much long-range stuff here, sadly, but if you like high-powered builds and you want something fast-firing, at least compared to a Springfield, then this will be your best bet. There are definitely poor aspects here, but the ability to one-shot infantry, which is something the gun should do as standard, is very useful. My second setup is an aggressive close quarters build. I use the ZF-4 scope with the Moskwaton barrel to improve handling times, and the 12 gauge compensator to massively reduce recoil. The magazine pouch speeds up my reloads, which is very important. I take no foregrip, and the long travel trigger helps reduce recoil further. I keep the construction standard. This setup is really quite powerful. The damage has been reduced, so now it isn't a guaranteed one-shot to infantrymen, but the recoil is insanely low, which allows for ultra-rapid follow-up shots. I desperately wanted to take a bayonet, but I found that without the 12G compensator, the recoil was just too high, so I took that instead. The magazine pouch is very helpful as it speeds up the reloads, which are more common than Tory political scandals. I did take this rifle out on the range to try and get some actual range data, but like Marvel's Eternals, it's so pitiful I'm not even going to talk about it. But if you use this thing up close, you'll find pretty soon that range isn't a big deal. The heavy bolt might surprise some, as lowering the fire rate of an aggressive build isn't usually what happens, but I found that the recoil reduction was needed, and the fire rate penalty isn't that bad, and you're not going to be hitting targets accurately at anything more than this, and they're also not going to be able to fire shots in between the time it takes you to shoot them twice, so I think it was worth it. This setup works well shoulder aimed too, and I find that a double tap to the centre mass is always more than enough to bring down anything less than a small elephant. The one thing this gun needs is a 10-round magazine. With that, this setup would really be very overpowered, but we'll quite rightly never get one of those for this gun. Thank you everyone for watching the video. Remember to like, subscribe and comment. It costs you nothing and it's a great way to help out the channel. Stay safe and goodbye.